Like I know skills and knowledge is a big one. Like they're most important ones. But reputation, like from a corporate, like just working in a corporate environment, like your personal branding and what you bring to the table and people knowing you in a positive way goes a long way from experience. Like your reputation, you can either build a really good reputation of being effective, efficient, good work ethic, or you can really build a bad reputation of inefficient, not responsive, whatever it is that you're not doing well. But a lot of that comes from knowledge and it comes from knowledge and skills. But I'm just highlighting, like, if you don't have the right branding where you are, you're not going to get far, because a lot of branding is based on, if someone has a positive experience with you, they will share that positive experience with others. And then straight away, like, if someone sees you as reliable and you can get things done, there's that level of trust you've already built. And so when you execute that based on your knowledge and skills, you've just built another positive experience with another person. And that just cascades over time, which, leads to like your network resources. But I'm just highlighting, like, your personal branding plays a big part in what you do. I think people underestimate it too much. It plays a huge part.
That's very true, yeah. And I would say, like, actually, the personal branding is actually dictated by your behavior.
Yes.
And your attitude. Because if you have like this you say you can have a lot of knowledge and skill, right? But if you have like this very narcissistic type of personality, and you see that a lot, like some people who are very knowledgeable, have high IQ, just don't have emotional intelligence. And they're very narcissistic. It's like almost like Iron Man. I don't know if you've watched like the Marvel movies, but Iron Man.
Been a while.
But
Iron Man, yeah.
he's like very smart and intelligent, but he also is very narcissistic.
Yeah.
So that also like creates a lot of other issues. But like the thing is, when you're dealing with customers or when you're trying to build a personal brand, like how you behave with people will be the last things that people will remember of you.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like that's why I think the last impression matters as well. Other than the first
people
impression.
never forget how you make them feel.
Yeah.
Like, you can talk to them all you want, spread all these words and say things to them, like put all these words in their ears and how you're going to change their life, blah, 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 whatever it is. But they're never going to forget how you actually made them feel at that moment. And sometimes it's just being authentic and just being true to yourself is so important. Like, again, like in corporate environments, you see people kiss ass, they suck up. It's common, right? Like, and it's not a bad thing, but you can tell the difference between when it's very disingenuine or it's authentic. Like, so yeah, you play, like, from experience, personal branding, it goes a long way. It goes a very, very long way. I think it's so underrated in my opinion.
Yeah, I like how you really brought that up, and I mean, your branding can be negatively reflected as well sometimes, but then again, it's just, I mean, yeah, there's knowledge and skill, but again, it's just like behaviors and attitudes.
Yeah.
You just really got to think about what can I do better and why did it lead to that?
I mean, you could have all the knowledge and skills. You could be like you said, like the smartest person with the highest IQ, but if you have no emotional intelligence and you're a narcissist and you have a high ego and you have a tendency to prove everyone like you're the smartest person and your reputation then starts off bad, all of that work you've put into learn the knowledge and skills is just dog shit.
And that's why there's a difference in, you could argue, salaries and pays. Because the thing is, the one who's like, and this is, I think he did talk about this a little bit, which is like, the one who has who focuses a lot on knowledge and skill, right? And they're very narcissistic. They also, in a way, cut off opportunities. And that's why they end up with like lower salaries and pay in a way. And it even says like how low paying jobs focus more on knowledge and skills, whereas higher paying jobs actually provide more resources and reputation. And yeah, I think like that behavior and attitude really plays an effect in that. And when you think about it, the high paying jobs that actually provide resource and reputation, it's almost like they understand, like, obviously they have a deep understanding of emotional intelligence, but they understand how to connect. Because when you look at the most profitable businesses, right, they're all software as a service based business or platforms. Like you look at Amazon, you look at Uber, you look at any of these, they're just connecting a problem to a solution, supply to demand. Like, for example, Uber, someone who wants, you have a passenger who wants to be able to, or a customer wants to get from A to B. And then you have someone who has the vehicle to get them to that location. That's pretty much, and you have a driver and you have a passenger. You just create a platform which connects them to. You just make the cut. That's it. That's how Uber works.
Yeah.
And you look at any of them, Amazon, same thing. Computing services and businesses that want to be able to build solutions or build websites or whatever, softwares. So you're just connecting them, again, servers with like people that need it. And yeah, there's so many other business models, same thing. It's all like they're leveraging off resources and just connecting network, basically. Whereas as opposed to just focusing on just knowledge and skill. And when you look at people that are also like higher up in terms of like the ladder, they are more focused on resources and also network and reputation. Whereas the people that are on the, obviously that may do like more of the difficult work, like tech, is more focused on the skills and in knowledge. But then again, everything begins from that.
Yeah. And you need both to go hand in hand. And that's a key thing as well. You can't have one person, like you need someone with the knowledge and skills. And then you need someone with the reputation, network, and resources. Because without that, your knowledge and skills are obsolete. But then without knowledge and skills, you can't build a good reputation.
Exactly.
So it's a lot of leveraging between people.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's just like, that's why you need to be very patient with like the first two buckets.
Yeah.
But then another thing is like if you have too much ego, because you think like, oh, like I don't need to pay. I'm already like, I could do this off $0. I don't need to pay to be able to learn. Like you don't want to invest in yourself, basically. Then that could also like, that could tarnish your knowledge and skills. Because at the end of the day, it's either you're paying time or you're paying money. So to be able to acquire it, essentially. But to accelerate it, you might have to spend a bit of money. Like the growth, the skill, or like just getting to that stage. But yeah, that's basically like the first
Sort of
law.
segment.
Yeah, segment.
Interesting. It's a good way to think about things. Very hard to execute though.
Which part would you say is like the hardest to execute?
Okay, look, I wouldn't say very hard to execute. It just takes, look, put it this way, people are impatient. People always doubt themselves. Like there's a lot of emotions, there's a lot of human behavior that goes into this as well. And it's not as straightforward as a concept is good. But there's also all these limitations your mind is going to provide. There's all these circumstances that can change. Your environment could be completely different. You know? So, I mean, Steven Bartlett's probably gone through the same level of adversity. That's why he's probably bucketed all this and put it together. But, you know, behind all of that buckets, there's a lot of, like, how much has he had to learn along the way and actually understand, oh, these are the 5 buckets that actually dictate what your purpose is. You know? So I think it's not complex. The doing isn't that complex. It's how your mind reacts to things, the circumstances, and the tricks your brain will play along the way that you have to be very wary of.
Yeah, I get what you mean. And like to actually touch on that, even though it's a bit off topic, is like I actually don't think it's emotions that complicate things. Because the way I understood like recently about emotions is that it's like a physiological response you have. It's like when you feel stressed, like your breathing and your breathing pattern and your sweat breaks out, and it's just like a biological reaction, right?
Okay.
Whereas feelings is what complicates it, because feelings is how you felt, like how you describe what you experienced, and that's where it becomes complicated because you build a story around that, and then you start to live with that story, and it has long-term effects. So actually, emotion, right, is short-term because you experience it for a few seconds. Like when you think about when you're angry, Like you get like heart pumping crazy, your breathing starts to become more shallow, like you start breathing quickly, you're ready to like punch on someone, right? Whereas the feeling is what actually lingers around. And that's where the complication starts. And I feel like, as you said, with imposter syndrome and those types of feelings of doubt, it's really like the story that you've made about yourself, which then affects how you go out in the real world. And there's going to be moments where you're going to become, you're going to get rejected and things like that. So it's actually not really the emotion that's at fault. It's actually it's not to say it's at fault, but it's actually what feelings, what complicates it. What story did you create out of that scenario and event you're going through?
And I think things aren't always as straightforward as you can. You can try to make things as straightforward as you can. It's never going to be straightforward. Like, things are going to be complicated, especially stuff like when you're finding out what your purpose is and what you're trying to do. That stuff is complicated. That stuff does not happen easily. It doesn't come to people easily. It takes a lot of time and effort and getting through a lot of mental hurdles to actually understand all of that. And then I think you touched on it. Patience is a big one. Like, it all doesn't happen within a week or two. Some of these things take 20, 30 years to master. Even consider yourself a master at it. Depends on what your ego tells you. Right? So, great concepts, but it sounds straightforward. It's not as straightforward as you think, because a lot of mental hurdles and a lot of adversity along the way that you need to find a way to succeed.
You know what? That's the beauty of it. Because if it was so easy, then it wouldn't be fun.
And everyone would be doing it.
Everyone would be doing it, or everyone would be living peaceful lives, and just no one would have an identity.
Exactly.
Because most of the stories are, the best memories people have of you is like stories. And stories come from things that you wouldn't ever predict ever happening.
Yep.
Like the most random stuff that happens is the most memorable things.
And the adversity is the memorable stuff. I agree.
100%.
You remember the bad times. You rarely remember your good times as much. You have moments of here and there.
To be honest,
I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm saying is like you're appreciative of your struggles more than your fun times or the good times.
No,
you appreciate your struggles more.
I get what you're saying. Like when you go through bad times, it amplifies the good times basically, because you've gone through the worst. Yeah, definitely. So yeah, that's like the first segment.
What's the second law?
The second law is ask, don't tell. So it's called the question/behavior effect.
All right, you got to elaborate on this.
Yeah, I know, it's pretty generic. So it's just saying like how asking questions promotes self-reflection and helps people make their own decisions rather than statements. So questions create more of like a psychological reaction and require like more of an active response, which would rather make people think rather than just reacting to statements. So an example is like saying, I'll eat better this year, right? When we sometimes say sentences like that, I'll train today, or I'll go to the gym. Like we say statements like that, right? And he's saying, instead of saying statements which can create a delay, because like when I say I'll eat healthy, there's no accountability in that. I'll just say I'll eat healthy this year. Where's the accountability? There's none. Whereas when I say, will I eat healthy today for lunch? Well, will I eat healthy food for today at lunch? It's like now I have to react to that because there's a sense of accountability and responsibility there. Or for example, instead of saying I'll go to the gym this year, I say, will I go to the gym today in the morning right now? See how it's like very different? Now it's like you're accountable. You have to answer. And by the way, you probably want to be mindful of where you use this type of stuff, because if you say that to like someone, if you say that to someone, they're going to it's very confronting and they wouldn't react to it positively.
Yeah.
But I'm saying this for yourself, because to ourselves, we can do that. But in the case of other people, you have to reword that, because it's going to become an argument otherwise. So, but what he's trying to say is that when you, instead of having sentences like that of your goals and stuff, when you have it as like questions, it really makes it more like you have a sense of urgency and you're going to take more immediate action as opposed to delaying it. And you have to be very specific. Instead of saying this year, okay, when is this year? And saying stuff like will, like when you use like I will do this, has like more of an ownership and is like more accountable action rather than saying I can or could, would, should do this. So, because with those things, I don't know if you realize when we say I should do this, there's like a condition behind it of why you're not doing it right now that we've subconsciously placed in our minds, which is actually not even, it's just a condition that we've created. It doesn't actually exist in the real world. Like there's no permission required for you to wait for some period to be able to do something. So, because when you use should, would, could, and can, you're enabling conditions, and what ends up happening is that it's more of like you're waiting for chance, you're waiting for luck. So you're actually operating on possibility as opposed to probability. So yeah, and it removes excuses because it's like, will I go to the gym today? It's either yes or no. I can't say maybe. And remember with Naval's if you say maybe, it's a no basically because you can't decide. So that's what he was saying. He's saying using the question/behavior effect. So when you change the statements into a question, it leads to a behavior immediately as opposed to delaying it and never taking action. What do you think about it?
No, it's interesting because it touches a lot on like the sort of language you use for yourself. Like, it makes sense. Like self-language you use for yourself and how you talk to yourself, the questions you ask yourself, the conversations you have with yourself, whatever it is, it plays a big part in how you act and how you behave. It's quite underrated, actually. I think there's been some studies done on it. I think we could touch on it later, but like, I don't know if it's called a placebo effect, if I'm using it in the right context, but the language you use over time will really like if you keep telling yourself, like, I mean, this might be a bad example, but it's like, if you're always telling yourself, I'm sad, I'm sad, I'm sad, I'm sad, you will start to exhibit those behaviors. And then you sort of take a spiral down that point where you've actually given yourself a condition. Like, I don't know if you've heard where people just believing things that haven't happened to them actually ends up happening. So they end up manifesting that sort of thing on them, which is like so important. Like, again, like you can't deter reality. Like you've got to address the reality aspect of it, but how you address that reality is very important, because you could manifest that reality into something a lot worse instead of making it better for yourself. You know, like recognizing that you might be having a downtime or you might be experiencing negative emotions. Like the reality is, yeah, you are, but how you behave and how you speak to yourself about that can really dictate whether you get out of that rut or you go further down a spiral where it's a lot harder to recover from. So it makes sense. I also think, like, from experience, like sometimes questioning people, if someone has, explained a concept, and instead of you stating that concept back in a statement to confirm your understanding, asking a question is a lot helpful. So instead of saying, like, just so I understand, like, does this work like this, a yes or no answer is less powerful than asking a follow-up question on that concept. Like, okay, but why does it work this way? Or how does it, can you explain this a bit more? It's a lot more effective.
Yeah, I think like they call that technique like playback or something.
Yeah.
Where you play it back, but then you're saying it in a frame of like questioning. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like the childlike curiosity that we talked about ages ago, which is
it's important.
Like a child asking like, why do we have like why all the time?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's true. Yeah, I think like it's good points that you did bring up, because yeah, it does. I think like when you look at all those successful people, they always say the same thing. Like it's always belief, that they always had belief in themselves. Maybe at the beginning they didn't, But at some point of time, where before they had the exponential growth, where they had conviction that they kept doing the same thing over and over again and improving, was belief. And I think that's and the beautiful thing about that, because like I remember watching Gary Vee and this not little, it was like this woman who said like, one day I'll become a great person, or like one day I'll do something great. And he's just like, why don't you just start today? Like, why do you have to wait for a day? Like, what are you waiting for? Like, who are you waiting for? Why are you waiting for me to tell you that? Well, let me tell you that you can start that today. Like, you don't need permission from anyone to become great today. And that, like, I completely paraphrase what he said, but just watching that video, I was just like, wow, that was eye-opening. Because he's saying to her, like, the day I started, I already knew, because people see what I am now, but I knew I was going to be this from day one I started. I believed in myself that I will be this, or that I am this person from day one. This is who I am from day one. He started. And that to me was just like, it's so insightful, because every single successful person says the exact same thing. They say it in a lot of, Leonardo da Vinci artistic type of like language, but they're sophisticated, very well articulated, but they all say the exact same thing. The day I started, the day I did this thing, or the day that I actually was, reaching, or what people see me as, is because I saw myself as this person from day one, and I was this, and I am this person from day one. And then it ended up manifesting into like a lot of, like, it's sort of like a self-realization. That's what they call it. Like, they realize that they are this person. They don't need anything. They don't need anyone. And then they just executed it and just lived to it and then improved over time. And then, everything external around them, the money and everything, is just a reflection of what was internalized, what was internal of them. But yeah, it was really powerful when I thought about it that way. And it also makes you think, it's like when you say like, I will become a great, or one day I am successful. It's like, you can almost flip that into a question. Okay, well, why aren't you successful right now? What do you define as success? Okay, instead of saying one day I will become successful, what will make today successful? What will make today a success? Just going from that, literally. So, and that makes you then think about like, what behaviors do I need to have today to define a success?
And those little wins compound over time.
Exactly.
So it's just very important.
That's the thing that we always miss, because it's like the iceberg analogy. We always see the 80% that's hidden. We don't see that, but 20% of successes. But it's the compounding wins. So yeah, question behavior effect. It's quite powerful, very powerful. And I think actually, coming back to studies, they did like this 100 studies, which was spanning for 40 years of research, and a team of scientists from 4 of US universities was asking, they discovered that asking is better than telling, because when it comes to also influencing someone's behavior, they found that is like the most effective out of all the 100 studies that they've done. So because people are more committed at arriving to their conclusions and things like that a lot sooner, as opposed to delaying it. Yeah. So it's even backed by research, essentially. But I think, as we said, like, when you question things with people, be a bit mindful of how you question it to them, because you can be harsh at yourself, as in like more accountable, like, will I go to the gym today or something like that. When you say that to someone else, it comes as very confrontational. So you have to change your way of language. Depending on the person. If it's like your best mate, you can be as harsh as you want with them, like a coach. But with someone else, you just have to be a bit mindful. Otherwise, you get a negative response,
which you don't want, and you don't know other people's circumstances. So
exactly. So you want to keep on, as we said, like, all of these things, they're just frameworks and just mental models, but you also want to consider context. Otherwise, you lead to other problems. But I think, like, one thing that I did also get was, like, when you're trying to address something, to become a bit less confrontational. Like, say, for example, let's go with the situation of like a partner, right? She didn't call you back for whatever reason. Like the night, like, at least she should call you when she arrived to some place. Or if you can think of a better scenario, But let's just say it's that she didn't do something that you told, like you expected, like for her to call you back. Instead of saying why didn't you call me back or something like that, you could say like, oh, what led you to not? Oh, like, how would I word this? I was gonna say like, instead of saying why, just relating it to what, or what stopped you. Okay, what stopped you from calling me yesterday? See how that's so different to me saying why didn't you call me yesterday? I said, what stopped you from calling me yesterday? It's not as confrontational. It's a lot easier and lighter to answer. So it's like sometimes if you're talking to someone else, instead of saying why, you just say what led you to that behavior. What led you to not doing this? What made you decide for you to go with this situation or go with this solution as opposed to this? We're saying, why did you go with this solution? It's very subtle, but it's like I feel people will be actually a lot better at responding with the what as opposed to why.
Yeah, the power of asking questions is it's a skill. Asking questions the right way, asking the right questions, it's not something that you're born with. It takes a lot of different experiences for you to go through, interact with a lot of different people, being in different circumstances for you to really understand the power of questioning. Would you agree?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, because I think people, like you can tell some people that are inexperienced with asking questions, and no question is ever stupid. Depends on the context. If they're learning something, ask all the stupid questions you want. But if you want an outcome from someone, like the example you used, or there's something that you're trying to suss out from someone, or whatever, for whatever reason, there's a way you need to ask those questions and get a response.
Yeah, and I think like
Very powerful skill.
It's very important that you keep in mind of context, because some people are very emotional and reactive.
Yeah.
Or like their way of, as we said, like heart, minds, or gut or something, instinct. Some people just react emotionally. So when they hear words like why, they start to they feel very confronted, and like as if it's like they're being verbally abused or something like that, when it's not the case. They create this image in their mind that's like that.
Yeah.
The story, feelings. Again, I said feelings complicate things. So that's why it's just you want to be mindful of your language, how you address it. There's better ways to address and get an outcome out of someone. Because some people might be like more logical. So saying why, it makes sense. But for example, especially with women, I feel like saying what stopped you from doing that, or what led you to this doing this, or like what led to this behavior or whatever, it's a lot easier for them to answer that as opposed to saying why did you do that. Whereas us men, we can do that. So I don't know, it's just an idea. If you want to become less confrontational, that's like just put it in a frame with starting with what.
That's a good point. Good point.
Yeah, so that's the second law, and you can see this like being applied in leadership. It can be applied in personal relationships, like you can strengthen your bonds, empathetic thinking, questioning, and as we said, like with the what as opposed to why, and like sales and marketing, like tailoring strategies especially when it comes to customers. That's very important. So that's where it's applicable, and then you could also like go even further with this with open-ended questions, because the one we talked about was like more of a closed-ended, which is yes or no. But you can, and I think we've talked about like Socratic questioning, so you can use that to then try and get like different types of questions and different, like if you want detailed answers or if you want dialogue and things like that. So yeah, that's basically the second law.